They overthrew a democracy and called it freedom. What the US did in Iran wasn't just a political move. It changed the Middle East forever. But no one talks about the real reason why. In 1953, Iran had a popular elected leader. He wasn't perfect, but he stood up for his people. And suddenly he was gone, replaced by a brutal dictatorship backed by the United States and Britain. This isn't a conspiracy, it's a fact. That's been declassified by the CIA. And it led to everything that came after, from the Iranian Revolution to modern tensions with the West. Today, we're going deep into how the US turned Iran into a dictatorship. Let's go back to the early 1950s. Iran had just come out of a rough patch. Foreign powers had been meddling in its politics for years, especially Britain, who basically treated Iran like a colony, thanks to one thing. Oil. Iran had some of the largest oil reserves in the world. And they were controlled by the British-owned Anglo-Iranian Oil Company, what later became BP. British elites made millions. Iranians, meanwhile, lived in poverty. No clean water, no proper wages. Air. Oil wealth was going overseas. So when a man named Mohammad Mossadegh came to power and said, "We're taking our oil back," Iranians cheered. He nationalized the oil industry. It was bold, and for Britain, absolutely unacceptable. Mossadegh was no dictator. He was elected Prime Minister in 1951 and quickly became a symbol of hope. He wore European suits, but lived a modest life. Was educated, charismatic, and had one simple belief. Iran should control its own resources, but nationalizing oil didn't just anger Britain, it terrified them. Because if Iran got away with it, what if other countries did the same? Britain needed to crush Mossad, but they couldn't invade Iran outright. It was the Cold War. Military moves in the Middle East would provoke the Soviet Union. So, they called their new ally, the United States. At first, US President Truman wasn't interested. He saw Mossadegh as a nationalist, not a threat. But when Eisenhower took office in 1953, things changed. And here's where it gets dark. The CIA launched Operation Ajax, a covert plan to remove Mossadegh from power. They didn't send tanks, they sent cash. They paid off Iranian generals, newspapers, street gangs, and religious leaders to turn the public against him. They spread fake news, ran anti-Mossadegh propaganda, and even organized riots. In August 1953, after weeks of chaos, the military, led by a CIA-backed general, stormed Mossadegh's home. He was arrested, tried, and put under house arrest. For the rest of his life? Who replaced him? Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, a young monarch who had fled the country during the chaos. With US and British backing, he returned, stronger than ever. He ruled not as a constitutional monarch, but as an absolute dictator. Now under the Shah, Iran looked Western on the surface. There were shiny buildings, fashion shows, American cars, but underneath was a police state. The Shah created SAVAK, a brutal secret police trained by the CIA and Israel's Mossad. They tortured dissidents. They jailed journalists. They silenced students. Anyone who dared to speak against the regime disappeared. The oil flowed again. Right back to the West. Washington called it a stabilized ally. But for millions of Iranians, it was the beginning of a nightmare. The US had traded democracy for dictatorship, all to protect oil profits and fight communism. But here's the thing. That decision didn't just affect Iran. It planted a seed. The Shah's repression grew worse. Anger boiled. Mosques became safe spaces for resistance. And by 1979, the people had enough. Millions poured into the streets, shouting, "Death to the Shah!" The Iranian Revolution overthrew the monarchy. But it didn't bring freedom. It brought a theocracy, a harsh religious regime led by Ayatollah Khomeini. And what did Khomeini say? He blamed America. He said the US destroyed our democracy, and now calls us evil. And that's the root of US-Iran hostility, not nuclear weapons. It's not religion. It goes back to 1953.2, coup, to a lie. To oil. What happened in Iran wasn't unique. The US did the same thing in Chile, in Congo, and Guatemala, backing coups, funding dictators, and calling it freedom. Iran never forgot too. Many in the West, the Shah was a modernizer. To Iranians, he was a puppet. And when people say, "Why does Iran hate America?" they don't know about 1953. They don't know about Mossadegh. They don't know how one decision changed everything. So the next time someone asks why Iran and the US don't get along, tell them this story. Because history doesn't just repeat itself. Sometimes, it never ended. Watch our next video on how the CIA created chaos in Latin America.